Thank you. I can see. Yeah. Merci. Bonjour.
Thank you.
Merci pour
Hello.
cette
Thank you for this
présentation.
presentation.
Je suis
I am
vraiment
really
heureuse
happy
que la
that the
salle
room is
soit
also full.
aussi remplie.
I'm sorry, I
Je suis
cannot comment
désolée,
on
je
your
ne peux
excellent
pas faire de
introduction
commentaires
to
par
our
rapport à
panel
votre excellente
because
introduction à notre
I
panel,
did not hear the
que je n'avais pas
translation.
entendu la traduction.
But I am sure that because of the way people were moved,
Vu la
it was
façon
something
dont
very
les
nice.
personnes étaient
Thank you
émues,
very much.
que
And
c'était
thank you
quelque
for the
chose
energetic
de
way
très avenant.
you
Je vous
started
remercie
this
beaucoup.
panel.
Et je
You
vous
introduced
remercie
this
pour
panel.
la façon énergique
So without
dont
further
vous
ado,
avez,
as you
commencé,
mentioned,
ce
I am going to
panel.
touch
Vous avez
a
développé
little
ce
on the
panel.
role of
Alors,
health
sans plus tarder, comme
inequalities
vous l'avez
of
mentionné,
indigenous peoples
je vais
in traditional
un
medicine,
peu toucher le rôle
and therefore
des inégalités
the
de
place
santé des
of
peuples
traditional
autochtones,
medicine as a
face
response
à
to
la
health
médecine
inequalities.
traditionnelle.
For
La
that,
place
I
de
am
la
going to
médecine
tell you about a
traditionnelle
case,
comme réponse
because the
aux
indigenous peoples
inégalités
are
de
talking
santé.
about it as if it were a united
Pour
whole,
cela,
something
je
unique,
vais vous
but the
parler
indigenous
d'un cas,
people
parce
is
que les peuples
360
autochtones,
million
on
people
en parle
across
comme
the
si c'était
5
un tout
continents,
unique, quelque chose d'unique. Mais les
or
peuples
even the
autochtones,
7
c'est
socio-political regions
360
that
millions
we
de
give
personnes
ourselves
à
as
travers
indigenous
les 5
peoples.
continents,
It's
voire les 7
5%
régions
of the world's
sociopolitiques que
population, but
dénommons
also
nous-mêmes en tant que
80%
peuples
of the
autochtones.
world's
C'est 20% de
biodiversity.
la
So it comes
population
from that.
mondiale, mais
Indigenous
également
people. That is not a whole, it's
80%
very
de la
diverse.
biodiversité mondiale. Donc,
So
il
I
vient
will
de
start
se
from an
dire que
example,
les peuples
the example of
autochtones
Mali,
sont un tout
the
unique,
country of
très
my
divers.
origin,
Alors,
but
je vais
more
partir
deeply
d'un
of the
exemple,
community from
donc
which I come
l'exemple du
from,
Mali, donc du
the
pays de
Tuareg
l'origine, mais
community.
plus profondément de la
So the plan of my
communauté
presentation
ici
will be the context of Mali.
Alors, le
The
plan de ma
benefits of traditional
présentation
medicine
sera
for the nomadic Tuareg
Mali,
indigenous people,
les avantages
the
de la
recognition of
médecine
traditional
traditionnelle
health
pour les
practices,
peuples autochtones nomades
the
Tuareg,
impact of traditional knowledge on the
reconnaissance des
well-being
pratiques
animals,
traditionnelles en matière de
and
santé,
some examples of the
l'impact des
relationship
savoirs
of indigenous
traditionnels
peoples
sur
to the
le
environment.
bien-être de l'animal et quelques exemples de la
So,
relation
by the way of
des
introduction,
autochtones à l'environnement.
traditional medicine remains in great demand in all regions of the world, whatever their level of development. In Mali, more than 80% of the population uses it in primary health care, regardless of the income level and socio-cultural or economic level. In 2002, the World Health Organization even put in place its first comprehensive strategy for traditional medicine. One of the goals of this strategy is to assist countries in developing national policies, evaluation and regulations of the practices of traditional medicine, and complementary or alternative medicine in Mali, Burkina Faso, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Uganda, the Republic of Congo. Research and evaluation of herbal treatments against HIV, AIDS, malaria, sickle cell anemia, diabetes mellitus, who are in endemic condition in this region. In addition, Tanzania collaborates with China in the production of anti-malarial treatment, so anti-malarial herbal. The price of anti-malarial drugs as a result of this research will be US $2 instead of $6 or $7, their current cost. In the Philippines, training programs in traditional healthcare have been developed and will be parallel in 7 tertiary level educational institutions. For more than a third of the population who do not have access to medicines, in this context, traditional medicine can be a lever for the realization of the right to health. To answer this question, we will make first a brief presentation of Mali, then expose some advantages of traditional medicine. Finally, we will raise some of the means of recognition of this medicine. So, in the Malian context, Mali is a country of West Africa, and it is about 1,240,000 square kilometers. 2/3 are completely desert. It is also a multitude of ethnic groups. It should be noted that African states are often reluctant to use the concept of indigenous people. That despite the remarkable work of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, where they are clearly listed the different indigenous peoples following the countries, and therefore Tuareg are indigenous peoples in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Algeria, and Libya. As for the Malian economy, it is essentially agro-pastoral. However, this sector does not ensure food security or financing development. Thus, Mali is classified by the United Nations Programme for Development, UNDP, in 2014 as 179 out of 187. It should be remembered that this index takes into account life expectancy, education, and average income per capita. In addition, Mali is very much a tributor of international aid for its development. Now, there are indigenous Malian localities where the indigenous people live, already difficult to access, and that is where the situation is exacerbated by the insecurity that is lingering there. So we have a recurring conflicts in these countries. Some health indicators of Mali: the population is 15,302,000. The average income per capita is $1. The life expectancy is 57 years old. The mortality quotient is 15 to 60 years for 1,000 inhabitants, and 277 for men, and 275 for women. The total expenditure on health per capita is $122 a year. The total expenditure on health is a percent of GDP is only 7.1%. This is data from the World Health Organization. So this brief description of the country shows that they are facing enormous difficulties. In addition to this, which affects all Malians, there are disparities according to income levels, the area, therefore rural or urban, and the region of origin. For example, infants under 5 mortality rates between regions are 134 for Bamako, which is the capital, and 154 for Kulikoro, which is another southern area, and up to 259 deaths per 1,000 live births in the regions north of Mali, where the indigenous peoples are. There are 312 health centers for Sikasso against only 18 for the Kidal region. According to the Research Center in Mali in 2008, these inequalities in health could be explained by the very characteristics of the health system of Mali. So we see how little organized this health system is. In Mali, as in all African countries, there are 2 care systems: the conventional system, imported because it is most often introduced by colonization, and the traditional health system, because it draws its essence from cultural values. The conventional care system is pyramidal. Basically, we have the community health center. It is the functional unit offering the minimum package of activity. The economic viability of this community health center depends on the distance, the size of the population, and its rate of attendance. So, for a community health center to remain open, it must meet certain criteria. For the distance, it is necessary to extend its activities to populations within a radius of 15 kilometers maximum. So, if you are not located in the 15 kilometers around the health center, you will not have access to health care. For the size of the population, it is necessary to be located in a commune, which is populated with about 100,000 inhabitants. If you do not fulfill this criterion, you will not have access to the conventional health care provided by the state. And it also requires a 40% attendance rate for the health center to remain open. When health care exceeds the competence of the community health center, patients are referred to the reference health center, which is at a higher level and is often located in regional capitals. These are in turn referenced, the sick, to higher centers. That is to say, national centers that are located in the capital and represent the top of the pyramid. Next to this pyramid, there is the Department of Traditional Medicine, which is located in the capital Bamako, under the National Institute of Public Health Research. The country adopted in 2005 the National Policy of Traditional Medicine, whose objective, I quote, is to contribute to the improvement of the state of health of the populations and to the sustainable human development by the rational use of the resources of medicine and traditional pharmacopoeia, according to the Ministry of Health of Mali. So, in total, there is a three-tiered health system that does not respond effectively to the needs of the entire population, including Tuareg nomads who live far away from the health structures that safeguard their traditional way of life and have a low level of health population density. They often live in small camps very isolated from each other. However, the Malian health system is open to traditional medicine. So what are the strengths of traditional medicine for this indigenous people in particular? And that brings me to talk about the benefits of traditional medicine for the Tuareg nomadic people. Geographical accessibility is the first asset. As we have emphasized above, the geographical accessibility to modern care is often limited for the rural and especially for the Tuareg nomads who live far from the chief towns of communes with community health cares. This condition is aggravated in the current humanitarian context because there is no conflict currently in Mali. But there is no village, a camp so small and so isolated that there is no traditional healer or there is not some local medicine. So traditional medicine goes into geographical accessibility, offers great hope of reducing health inequalities according to the geographical origin in Mali, if we go to the other advantage, which is affordability. In addition to its geographical accessibility, traditional medicine is also more economically accessible than conventional care. Purchasing power is an important determinant of health, since 51.4% of the population in Mali does not have the lowest cost of care, which is between 300 and 600 CFA, or just under $1, as well as prescription fees that also exceed the dollar according to the average bank. This barrier is all the more important in a nomadic environment, where often the only source of energy is livestock, which is decimated by climate change. I refer to droughts, growing insecurity with the movement it generates, and the banditry that it promotes. However, traditional medicine does not induce operating costs such as those of modern medicine, premises and personal equipment to take away drug costs, etc. Indeed, traditional healers often tend, in their own concession, with plants or materials from the surrounding environment. On this subject, there is a traditional healer. Moreover, the only one who has written a book in my community called Fadi, who happens to find my grandmother to point out that their house has always housed one or more patients and that she cares for free. Sometimes he asks the patients for his family in return to collect the necessary ingredients for the care that they will provide. To care, she says, in an indigenous Tuareg environment It is above all an act of love without monetary cost that means such. So traditional medicine is not only geographically and economically accessible, it is also culturally accessible. So that's what brings us to the cultural accessibility of traditional medicine. At the roundtable of financing of the National Policy of Traditional Medicine organized in 2010 in Bamako, the Malian Minister of Health states, "We expect partners, support a strategic choice that in addition to ambitions for achieving the Millennium Development Goals and reducing poverty raises a cultural dimension." Traditional medicine is part of the culture of people who resort to Malians. In general, the original concept of nature includes both the material world, the living or dead sociological environment, as well as the metaphysical forces of the universe. This notion is fundamental to seize the medicine of a community, which is the reflection of its way of life, of its thought in a world of its culture. For example, in the indigenous Tuareg society, physical diseases are fundamentally classified as hot diseases. The treatment will have cold substances to cool the blood, and conversely, there are cold diseases whose treatment will be directed by cold treatments. Moreover, with traditional medicine, there is no language barrier. However, as we pointed out in Mali, the official language is French. Bambara, spoken national language with a multitude of detainees who speak neither French or Bambara. For example, the Tuaregs speak Tamashek. Thus, language is a determining factor in the caring, nurturing relationship. When the two people in this dialogue do not understand each other, this may be an obstacle for the patient to express their symptoms and their understanding by the caregiver. On the one hand, but also on the other hand, it may be a barrier of confidence from the patient to the caregiver, and thus an impediment to the expression of its pathology and subsequently also the observance of the treatment. In a word, communication between healthcare providers on the one hand and beneficiaries on the other. The same is true of other aspects of culture. For example, the Tuaregs are a people where modesty has a very important place. Therefore, they are reluctant to consult with a conventional health worker who is not culturally sensitive because they are afraid of being undressed by the caregiver. For example, during the physical examination or the administration of some care. In conclusion, whatever our level of income, our geographical origin, or our interpretation of the disease, there is a type of care available to us in Mali, traditional medicine. With the help of globalization and health inequalities, that are only getting stronger, how can we then recognize the traditional medicine that finally happens to be the boy? So the recognition of traditional medicine in health matters. The WHO strategies for traditional medicine in 2002 and in 2005 revolved around a number of policy issues, promoting the efficacy and safety of the quality of traditional medicine, increasing the availability and quality of traditional medicine, affordability of traditional medicine, and the promotion of a judicious therapeutic use of traditional medicine. So if we go back to the policy point, the implementation of a policy makes it possible to integrate traditional medicine. with the national health systems in an appropriate way so it will not be anarchic. For the promotion, efficiency, safety, and quality of traditional medicine, this will allow to have enormous health insurance. In order to increase the availability and affordability of traditional medicine, here I want to draw particular attention to intellectual property. Here I want to draw particular attention to intellectual property because more and more traditional therapies are acquired and patented by pharmaceutical companies to which profits go without. On the other hand, no compensation to Native people who are the original holders of these treatments. On the other hand, without their free prior consent, and with the additional risk of monetary inaccessibility in the long run, the same substances are marketed by pharmaceutical companies. For the promotion, we can integrate in training the traditional medicine of conventional healthcare. Providers can encourage research on medicinal plants by creating a partnership with universities, research institutes, disseminated the traditional medical knowledge by their written transcription, since they are often held by the elders who will soon leave and who communicates part oral tradition. They do not have access to writing. Traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples, including traditional medicine, is also useful for animal health and the environment. So I'm going to mention some of the impact of traditional knowledge on animals because I only have 5 minutes left to define welfare in animals. So we have to call 3 big groups of authors. We have Hugh's first definition that places the harmony between the animal and its environment at the center of his well-being. Hugh speaks of a state of perfect physical and mental health where the animal is in complete harmony with its environment. In this case, we will talk about harmony if the needs of the animal are met. These authors evoke a kind of motivation in fulfilling the needs of animals by using what his environment and nature offers him. Traditional knowledge is made of elements that promote this harmony. Everything comes as natural. The cattle feed, its care, etc., are drawn from nature and the environment in respect of the elements that surround animals. The latter are not locked in cages and manage to meet their needs spontaneously. So I go. There is a part about adaptation of the animal to the environment and the absence of suffering. I will let you read that since it will be published and we have no time. I will not overuse my colleagues' time. I will touch a little part about the environment. Maybe I will go directly on the recommendations, and I apologize for time management. So I am going to go directly to the recommendations. I'm sorry I cannot give you the part on animal health and the environment, but the main message is that we see the environment, the indigenous people as alive, as well as animals, and we need some harmony to live together. So the recommendations for CUMIPAZ and for all the actors here, it will be to encourage the use of both knowledge to reduce suffering in humans and animals and to ensure their fundamental rights to health, including the objective 3 of the development of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. To develop the gesture-made mode and methods of care that have been proven with respect for the intellectual property of indigenous peoples. Work on plants and other products used in traditional care for identifying side effects to improve their use, making traditional medicine products accessible for the most vulnerable to access healthcare. This is a very important point for social justice and building peace. Developing the use of traditional knowledge in animals will be freer. eat better and produce without constraint to have a better in animals. We must better preserve the environment. These two elements are essential for sustainable well-being for ourselves, for which we will have all committed ourselves through the 2030 Development Agenda, but also by being peace activists promoting the transmission of people's traditional knowledge and understandings. Indigenous future generations and new information technologies can play an important role in this. And I leave you with this word of an elder of this territory, a Guna of Panama, who says, if you listen to us, the indigenous peoples, you will never be poor. Thank you for your attention.